What's going on, Jeremiah? How are you?
I'm good, Wei. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. It's funny, as I got older, I realized that I want to ride really slow and I don't want to fall on my head. When I do fall on my head, I don't think my lofty hair is going to protect my brain.
I mean, even for me, I want to protect my head as well when I ride my scooter.
Exactly. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm here to talk to you about a watch that I'm so excited about. It is the Parmigiani Fleurier PF Tonda, a watch that's made so much noise in the last couple of years, but a very special edition that's been created for us. But let's start by talking about Parmigiani Fleurier, right?
Yeah, I mean, Parmigiani Fleurier is a brand which I think is underserved and underappreciated in many, many ways. When Michel Parmigiani started, as a watchmaker, it was in 1976. He started his workshop and he was, restoring antique watches for the Patek Philippe Museum. And in 1980, that was when he met the Sandoz Family Foundation, right? But only 16 years after that, they kind of helped him to start his own manufacturer in 1996.
Yeah. And Jeremiah, what I like about Parmigiani Fleurier is the history it's had with some of the most incredible watchmakers, right?
Right.
So if you think about it, working in the restoration and high complication department of Parmigiani Fleurier over the years has been people like Denis Flageolet of De Bethune, Kari Voutilainen, incredibly, and then when Kari left, the person that took his place was Stepan Sarpaneva.
Right.
So if you look at it like from that perspective, what an incredible lineage that Parmigiani Fleurier has had, right?
Yes.
And so for me, it's interesting because I've had always the greatest respect for Parmigiani Fleurier. Some of the things they created, I think, has been astounding. So you remember the original Bugatti watch, of course,
right,
which was a watch that had the entire construction of the movement done vertically, right?
Yeah.
Which I think was like the biggest revolution in movement construction since the 18th century. And Jean-Antoine Lepine completely, changed construction of movements from pillar to single base plate. And then you had watches like I think they had the first 30-second tourbillon as well.
Oh, yes.
They had some stunning pieces over its history. But I remember that every time I went to visit Parmigiani Fleurier and I looked at the watches, I had so much respect for what they were doing technically, from a horological perspective, but I didn't find a design of a watch that kind of filled my heart with desire.
Right.
I didn't see a watch that was like, wow, I love that, I want to try that on, I want to wear that. But that all changed in 2021.
Yeah.
Yes, on August 30th during the first day of Geneva Watch Days.
Right.
So I remember it was incredible because it was the first time I was able to travel after the pandemic. It changed the world. And I was so delighted to be going to Geneva. I walked into the Hotel Beau Rivage, went up to the Parmigiani Fleurier suite, and went to say hi to Guido Terreni and Rachel Gong, who are my friends and who are people that I love and respect a lot. And I saw this watch in sort of the black grayish style configuration, and I was like, what in the hell is that? That's so cool, right?
Right. So the Tonda PF came out in 2021, and we should probably talk about Guido Terreni a little bit.
Absolutely.
He spent 20 years at Bulgari, right? And he was one of the people at Bulgari who really produced the concept of the Octo Finissimo. And like you said, you love the Octo Finissimo. It was the post-financial crisis watch, and it really changed the game for the integrated bracelet watch. So
yeah, I have nothing but the greatest respect for Bulgari. As you know, the Octo Finissimo is one of my favorite watches. And the three guys that really changed the game in terms of that watch was, of course, Jean-Christophe Babin, the CEO of Bulgari, Fabrizio Bonamassa Stigliani, who is the guy who designed the watch, and Guido Terreni, who during the early days was instrumental in the producing of this watch. And he's a brilliant person with the technical dimensions of watches, the fit, the feel, the movement architecture, all of this, right? So when I went to go look at the Tonda PF, which launched in 2021, that was the first thing that I realized. I was like, this watch is so appealing somehow. So what I loved about it was this incredible dichotomy between something that was apparently simple, very zen and tranquil, until you look closer at it and you realize how complex it was, right? So I remember looking at it and I was like, wow, look at that guilloche that's on the dial.
And it's barley corn, right?
Yeah, it's a barley corn motif, and he was laughing because they had experimented with different sizes of that motif, and the guy who was in charge of the guilloche machine was so proud of himself that when he finally came in, he said, I've got it smaller than anyone's ever done barley corn.
Wow.
But then they put a sapphire crystal on it and the pattern disappeared.
Right.
So they actually had to go to one size bigger. Okay. And on top of that also is the minimalism of the watch as well. When Guido decided to look at the codes of Parmigiani Fleurier, he decided that there was a motif, the PF logo that's used in the rotor, for example, and he wanted to make that the central design and typological.
Yeah, because in the beginning, I think the logo was the brand fully spelled out, right?
Correct. exactly. So he wanted to minimize it, make it modern, and make it really kind of cool and contemporary. And he really did a great job with that. So the PF, as it was, is a watch that is minimal in that regard, right? It's super modern. So then he took the bezel, for example, and he put a micro knurling on this bezel.
Yes.
There's a fluting on it that is like so refined and so precise. It's like nothing I've ever seen
and
before.
that harkens back, I think, to the original Michel Parmigiani creation from 1999. They call it as a gadroon, which is a decorative detailing on the bezel, but that watch had a alternating gadroon, so kind of like a step bezel. But Guido has really kind of taken that design cue and put it in this contemporary
Exactly.
piece.
So if you look at like the vintage Torix, for example, as well, they have this double step bezel with this kind of fluting, but he miniaturized that fluting even more. So what I love, what he's actually drawing from the real codes of Parmigiani Fleurier, but making something that's all his own. Then he created this case, right? I mean, this case was in existence before, but he amplified its sort of like dynamic tension between elegance and muscularity, right? So you've got these wonderful sort of flared lugs, and then you have a polishing on the inner surface of these lugs where it faces the crown as well.
I absolutely love the lugs because they don't just meld into the case, they stick out slightly, and to me it kind of frames the case band.
Absolutely, it flares and it gives you sort of a starting anchor point to flow into the bracelet so elegantly, which I absolutely love. And then you talk about the proportions of the watch, right? So it's 40 millimeters in diameter, and Rachel Lowe, my friend who's head of communications for Parmigiani Fleurier, who is attractive and petite woman, she wears the 40 size with total style. Like it works perfectly on her wrist. And actually, I remember seeing that watch at a party that we were at together. It's when I borrowed it and put it on my wrist. I was like, wow, this feels so fantastic. And so the ergonomics of this watch are incredible. As I said, 40 in diameter, but just 7.8 in terms of thickness.
Incredible.
Which is, it's not the thinnest watch in existence, and I know there's other brands, I think we mentioned it, that are chasing that objective, but it's so balanced.
Right.
And I would say that's the thing about this watch. There's a lot of integrated bracelet watches now, right? There's the AP Royal, there's the Patek Nautilus, there is the Chepek Antarctique, there is the Chopard Alpine Eagle, there is the Octo Finissimo. And every one of those watches today, I think, has a rightful place. I think that what's great about today is that the integrated bracelet market and the offer has expanded in such an interesting way.
Yeah.
But this watch, from an ergonomic perspective, was the one that blew me away the most because of the curvature of the case, the flow of and suppleness of the bracelet. And when you put it on your wrist, it just feels amazing, right? Well, you know what? Don't take my word for it. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Wei. Wow, you're completely right. There's that elegance, but that muscular presence as well, as you see how it tapers the bracelet from the lugs all the way to the clasp.
Right, and then the alternating finish where you've got polish and brush, but you've got so many different sort of planes and so many different surfaces that are being treated in different ways that you have this maximum of contrast. So this is what I mean is that the watch in some ways is really minimalistic, and in some ways really maximalistic as well, just in terms of the amount of thought that went into it and the amount of sort of minute sort of detail that goes into it as well. So of course we want to do a very special edition of this watch. I remember in August 30th, I think it was like 2 days later, so let's say the 1st of September, I said to Guido, listen, I think this watch is going to be an absolute revelation. I love it. I want to buy one, so I actually bought the blackish gray dial version of it as well. Wore it for, I actually wore it all throughout 2021. So I wore it to New York, wore it to Los Angeles, wore it during spin classes, wore it to concerts, it was just my constant companion, and it was effortless to wear. And I wore this watch, which is our version of it, on my motorcycle today, because I just want to show you that when you're riding a bike, you want a watch that you kind of almost forget about, right? I have to wear a watch during every activity.
Yeah.
Every activity. But
I mean, you have a lot already going on the bike, right? So you won't be worrying about your watch.
You ride motorcycles as well.
Just scooter.
And the thing is that you just want something that just fits on the wrist, doesn't sort of run around your wrist as well, but sits properly, even though you're having the vibrations of the motorcycle, and has perfect visibility when you want to tell the time, but it's so comfortable. And there's so many watches out there that I loved initially, but after wearing them for a couple of hours, you're like, who the hell designed this? Was it a Spanish inquisitor? I have had watches where deployants, the ears
just dig
of the
into your wrist. Oh my goodness!
Or the crown is just banging into the back of your hand, and it's just like leaving this like gouge like the size of the Marianas Trench,
Right.
So this watch just feels perfect. But then of course we wanted to do a very special dial execution, right? And if you think about it from Revolution's perspective, we had the Pink Dial Project, which was our charity that raised money for breast cancer. We love salmon dials. We love the color pink. As you can see, I'm wearing a pink shirt as well. So we wanted to do a salmon dial.
And every Revolution edition has had a nickname. I think this one is called the Serenissima.
Yes, precisely.
Right?
Exactly.
Tell us about that inspiration behind that.
Well, like I remember when I got out of COVID, actually, funnily, just before I went to Geneva, I went to Venice, and I remember sitting on the terrace of my favorite hotel there, and it's called the Gritty Palace, right? And I remember drinking a Spritz or a Bellini, or I think I drank first a Spritz, then I drank a Bellini, and then I drank a Negroni. Then things, got kind of fuzzy.
Right.
And watching the sun go down in the water of the Adriatic Sea, and just having this sense of blissfulness.
Right.
And as the sun sinking into the sea turned the water into this incredible sort of like peach, rose, gold color, I was like, that would be a great like color for a dial.
Yeah.
And then I remember telling this to Guido, and he started laughing, and he said, okay, we'll do a salmon dial, but we're going to experiment to get the color just right. So he started with salmon, then he added like kind of an under layer of like gold to it as well. And then he even added like a soft kind of gray to it as well that kind of gives it a little bit of mystery and keeps it a little bit more subtle as well,
right,
which is very typical of his style and his elegance, right? And the result is this dial, which I have to say I think is absolutely stunning. Serenissima is, of course, the nickname for Venice, the serene one. And so we've decided to nickname this watch the Parmigiani Fleurier PF Tonda for Revolution Serenissima.
Right. I think the name couldn't get longer.
No.
Yeah, and PF, we were talking about its technical ability. It's really the Sandoz family foundation, like in the early 2000s, that kind of consolidated and kind of created the manufacturing to one of the most vertically integrated manufacturers there is today.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of touring the facilities, went to Vauxhall, went to their case maker, went to their dial maker, went even to where they make their hairsprings as well.
Right.
And it's absolutely stunning. So that movement is kind of a result of these competences as well. It is a PF703. It is a micro-rotor movement which has 48 hours of power reserve, spectacular performing, incredibly beautiful to behold, ultra slim, which allows you to create a case of 7.8 mm.
Right.
But what else I like about this watch also is it's like it genuinely is a wear it everywhere, do anything kind of watch. Even though the crown, when I initially looked at it, felt kind of small, I realized actually it's incredibly ergonomic. You can use it, it doesn't dig into your skin, and it's also a screw down crown, which gives you 100 meters water resistance.
Right.
So you can wear this jumping into the ocean, like doing whatever you want. Exactly. Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, Jeremiah, what do you think of the color of the dial?
I love it. To me, I really like the balance, not just with the color, but also with the skeleton hands. You talk about the minimalism, but I really, if you have to put a date wheel, on a time-only watch, right, you've got to match the color of the date wheel to the dial. To me, that's an incredibly important detail.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing our Chopard 1860, right, and we wanted to do a salmon dial as well, right, and then that watch had actually come out in two different versions with a color matching date wheel and without, right, and we're like, dude, it has to be the color matching date wheel, and that's why we did
because
that
when you look at it from afar, it sort of like disappears, even though the window kind of breaks up. Exactly. The symmetry a little bit.
What's funny is that we actually did an experiment of this watch without the date window as well, because like everyone likes these hyper minimalistic watches, and we felt that actually it worked better with the date wheel, so we kept it.
Right. Yeah, I think in general the market does want to have the date. Well, it's just more useful.
Whenever I'm filling out something like like an immigration card, or when I go to a hotel and they're asking me to check in, I just like to be able to have a date. Yeah. And you were like, yes, I know you have it on your phone, but I don't want to have like the sort of banality of reaching into my pocket. I just want to check my watch,
And I'm only in my 30s, but I do forget the date from time to time.
I'm 20 years older than you. Right. I forget it all the time. But anyway, that's it. That's the story of this beautiful watch. I want to thank Parmigiani Fleurier. I want to thank Guido Terreni, Rachel Young, the epitome of masculinity known as Pascal Brandt, who's working with Parmigiani Fleurier as well, and enhancing its masculinity, I'm sure, in very discreet, subtle, and heroic ways. Right. And thank you guys so much for this watch. We love working with you. It's in 25 pieces as a limited edition. I think a few of them gone already. I don't know how people found out about this watch. Neither do I. But that's it. I believe it's $22,000 US. Steel case, automatic micro-rotor movement, PF703, salmon /
Gold,
gold / Bellini / Magic Hour dial.
Everything's in there.
Exactly, and that's it. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in.
Till next time. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Wei.